Many of our members and friends celebrated Passover this last week. And I am thinking today about a verse that is sometimes spoken during the Seder dinner. It is a quote from the Exodus, where God promises to deliver the Israelites from the land of Egypt to the land of milk and honey. The promise of a land flowing with milk and honey has come to mean many things. But as one version of the Haggadah, that script for the Seder dinner, puts it, that land will not come until we love one another as ourselves. In this version, the land of milk and honey is not a physical place. It cannot be located on a map. Instead, it is a state of the heart and of the soul. It is a place where every person is treated with dignity and with love. It is a place where each person is celebrated for the unique gifts that they have to offer. These last several months, I have been reading a lot about the autism spectrum. And this is because there is a child in my family who was recently diagnosed. And I have other family and friends who are neurodiverse as well. And as you can imagine, or perhaps you know by heart because you are on this spectrum or you love someone on this spectrum, there is deep complexity and there is pain stitched into many of these stories. We do not live in a land of milk and honey. The world is not designed for people with disabilities. And people on the spectrum often learn this fact early on. Autistic people can suffer a lot of abuse. And what is infuriating is that this abuse is often disguised as treatment or even as love. Now, I'm going to share an example of this because I think it's important to understand what this looks like. But I do offer a content warning because it is painful to hear stories such as these. In 2018, the Washington Post published an article, and the author, Whitney Allenby, describes in wrenching detail the way that she forced her autistic 5-year-old to see Sesame Street live. It was in a loud and cavernous auditorium, and this was despite his intense fear of indoor spaces. Her son kicks and wails, but she forcibly restrains his limbs and wrestles him to the ground. Eventually, she overpowers the 5-year-old, whom in the article she calls a thoroughbred of resistance. Once inside, the young boy settles into a placid state and watches the show. Allenby is triumphant, declaring his phobia overcome and framing her actions as tough love. As it turns out, that is not how many autistic people read that piece. Aiden Friday, who is autistic and non-binary, wrote in response, many autistic children grow up in environments rife with the physical confrontations like the one that occurred in Allenby's article, or in homes that reject basic peer-reviewed medical science, or with parents who demonstrate a complete and utter disregard for their autistic children's autonomy, and all of that is framed as love. But it is not love. It is abuse. The author continues, we are survivors who don't want autistic children of any age to be abused, so please listen to us, believe us. Your child does not need to be cured. They need to be respected, listened to, and above all, loved, truly loved. Many of the poems and songs that we are hearing today speak to these complexities of growing up autistic. Georgine read a wonderful poem from an autistic 11-year-old named Aiden Levy. And that poem explores some of the pain of being neurodiverse in a neurotypical world. Aiden communicates with a letterboard and is otherwise nonverbal. He writes this of his experience. In the lonely and tired brain, no soaring sounds escape their deathbed. Nowhere to go, nothing to be said. These lines capture the exhaustion of having a brain that is differently wired, and it also hints at a yearning to be more fully understood. But instead, he is stuck with his own lonely brain and secret and quiet secrets, and also a world that doesn't often want or care enough to understand, and instead consists on a conformity that excludes him. In the science fiction novel Death's End by Cixin Liu, there is a moment in the narrative where an intergalactic fragment enters our solar system. And it looks like a glowing white sheet of paper. People take it to be a harmless novelty. It is only after it starts expanding that people realize that something deeply destructive has entered their reality. Everything this sheet of paper touches turns from 3 dimensions into 2. It starts to expand, and like a steamroller, it flattens everything in its wake. It flattens stars and planets and people into something that looks like a painting, draining them of their life, freezing them in time. Anything that could possibly have an inside that would exist with 3 dimensions is crushed, flattened. In other words, any dimension of interiority, of inner life, is annihilated by this expanding fragment. Now, in the novel, the fragment is not explicitly metaphorical. It is not intended to signify something else. Instead, it moves the plot along. However, I cannot help but read it as a code for the habits and the messages that flatten our inner lives and drain away the capacity for uniqueness, novelty, and beauty. These are the messages that demand that people need to fit, need to belong by steamrolling their uniqueness and humanity. I am saddened that so many parents choose to reduce the dimensions of their children's inner lives, or that they introduce this fragment into their children's spirits rather than helping them flourish in their unique singularity. It could be different. We could live in a world that rearranges itself to accommodate difference, because that is always an option too. We could answer the call of love rather than stand on the side of love. We do not need to force someone with a disability to change to fit our needs and expectations. Instead, the way the world is could change to rearrange to accommodate everyone. This is called the social model of disability. What it relies on is, rather than pressuring individuals to live into unaccommodating expectations, it says that the expectations themselves need to be rethought and reframed. Zama Yora is autistic and a rabbi. And his book, So Compassionate It Hurts, was part of what inspired this sermon. And he starts that book by quoting his favorite poem. It goes like this: "Happy are those who sow but do not reap, for they have wandered far. Happy are those who are generous and in their glorious youth have made the days lighter, throwing their jewels as they traverse the story of their lives." Rabbi Yora writes, "It is a poem about the greatest of human beings, those who have enriched the world and touch everyone in their passing. It is a poem about unfettered generosity with one's gifts." Rabbi Yora was slow to realize that the jewels that he had to share, the gifts that he had to give, were not despite his autism, but precisely because of his autism. He found not a spectrum of liabilities, but rather has come to appreciate a spectrum of gifts. These gifts include his literalness and ability to cut through vagueness and confusion. It includes his deep comfort with solitude. It includes his ability to learn a language in only a couple of weeks. It includes his hyper attunement to routines and discipline. It includes the effort that he has to put into understanding others and the ways that that has led to a uniquely compassionate life. Yet another gift that he discovered is appreciation for the vastly different ways that we human beings show up to life. And rather than flattening these dimensions, he creates a community in his congregation that honors them. He transforms his congregation into a place of milk and honey. These are his words. I am different. I have always felt different, felt that something was off, felt that I didn't belong. I only found the words for that difference when I became an adult. I know how hard it is to live with significant difference, and that is why I make it a cornerstone of my mission to create a space for difference in my community. He doesn't wish to make others fit into some kind of narrow vision or expectation. Instead, his is an attempt to arrange and rearrange, to expand and swell until everything belongs in its own non-belonging. And isn't that delicious? Isn't that exquisite? My spiritual companions, that is the land of milk and honey. That is a place that I want to get to. It's not a place where you belong at the expense of your humanity, of what makes you unique, of what makes you different. It is not governed by norms and expectations and anxieties about fitting in. It is not about being barely tolerated by a group that binds itself together through a single dimension of similarity. It is instead a savoring of multiplicity and plurality, a celebration of the sprawling differences that fit into no neat set. It is a taking joy in those contrasts and divergences, those folds that always unfold into a spectrum that is always just at the edge of our perception. Anybody who offers me some vision of paradise without those differences is selling me goods that I have no use for. I want instead all of those layers of beauty and difference that nest inside of us like Russian dolls, opening out into complexity and contradiction and layered multitudes. It is on us to ensure that we make this community and that we seek to make this wider world just such a place, because that is the milk, that is the honey, that is the land that has been promised. And oh my God, that is a better way to be in the world than abiding by habits that flatten it down to fewer and fewer dimensions.